Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman. He's Jim Salisbury. And, Jim, you reported that the Phillies will likely get to stay put in South Philadelphia for spring training 2 whenever that does come. Take us through that, and let's look at what some of the potential benefits could be of the Phillies staying in their home park.
Yeah, Corey, that's what I'm hearing, that, if they can play games in early July, they're going to need to reconvene for spring training 2 sometime probably mid-June, probably looking at 3 weeks of spring training. I think we've all known that. The big question that we didn't know is, where would spring training 2 be? Would they reconvene in Clearwater, or would they reconvene just right in South Philadelphia and get to work at their home ballpark? I think there's merits to both. But from what I'm hearing is it's likely that they will reconvene in South Philadelphia and have spring training 2 at Citizens Bank Park. The benefit there is, obviously, it's your home park. You're familiar with the place, although you are familiar with Clearwater. But I think the big benefit is, when players return to their teams, there's going to be sort of an initiative protocol, health protocol. Kind of be reinitiated back into the group. You're going to have to go through various health protocols. So you would have to do them in Clearwater and then back in Philadelphia. If you were to have it in Clearwater, you have to do it at 2 facilities. This means you only have to go through those initial health protocols at 1 facility. Now, I don't think it's hammered out in granite that they're going to do it in Philadelphia, but everything I hear is that it is likely that they will reconvene in Philadelphia mid-June and have their spring training there. I mean, that's all dependent on MLB and the union hammering this thing out, and there indeed being an 82-game season. But certainly it looks like they're going to reconvene in South Philadelphia. That is what is being discussed. You asked about benefits. I think there's a lot of them. The big one, you only have to go, like we mentioned, you only have to go through the health protocol once. But, in terms of challenges, you're only going to have 1 diamond really at your disposal. But actually, they'll have more than that. You have FDR Park across the street where their Urban Youth Academy is. Villanova plays a lot of games over there. So you have more field space if you need it. You're going to have, 5 mounds for pitchers to work on at the stadium, and they have more mounds across the street. So if you need extra field space, there is field space in FDR Park. You could also utilize Lehigh Valley if you needed to, where the AAA team is, or Reading, where the AA team is. The Phillies have ownership stakes in both clubs. So you have 2 clubhouses, obviously, at Citizens Bank Park. Not the ideal place to hold the spring training, but nothing is ideal here in baseball season 2020. So that sounds like the way they're leaning.
Now, are we talking playing spring training games? And if so, what do you think those would look like? Would they be against teams that are local to Philadelphia? Would it be split squad games where the Phillies are playing they're playing their minor league teams, or even the 40-man roster is split up? Like, how do you think this is all going to work?
Not sure. I think the decision on where to hold spring training is going to be the team's decision. So I would think, if the Baltimore Orioles train in Baltimore, that's a very potential partner to play some exhibition games. I could see you playing them a couple times here, a couple times there. I think you could certainly have exhibition games against the New York teams if they're training there. Depends on where teams are training. If there aren't teams to train against that are quick bus rides, you can have intra-squad games, because Phillies still have 53 guys on their spring training roster. So I'm not even sure if they have to make cuts, because you're probably going to have a rather large, probably a 50-man, roster at your disposal. Now, you might not have 50 guys every night. You have to tab certain guys for a given series or a given game. But you could certainly play intra-squad games against your own guys. I think you could bring in other prospects from the higher levels to participate in camp. So there'll be ways to get competitive reps for pitchers and hitters.
And what about the minor leaguers? What about, Phillies prospects? Are they going to all this uncertainty about the minor league season? What happens to them?
still a lot of uncertainty about the minor league season. I have a hard time believing we're going to see a minor league season. And we're not going to see a minor league season as we know it. I think we're approaching the time when it's safe to say there probably won't be minor league seasons in some of these affiliates, maybe AAA, maybe AA. It's just hard to see it all getting off the ground because by the time you're off the ground in July, what's there left of the minor league season? Usually only 2 months, and I don't see them expanding into September. And with the expanded maybe 50-man roster, the bulk of your AAA team is going to have to be at the disposal of the big league team. Your non-roster guys that might have reported to AAA, like a Phil Goslin. I see him probably sticking around on a taxi squad, and even your prospects that were ticketed for AAA, like Spencer Howard and Alec Boehm. I see them hanging around the big league team and being utilized. So, I don't know how they're going to work this in terms of the minor leagues, but it's hard for me to think that there's even going to be a minor league season getting off the ground. I think that's going to be injurious to the development of, low-level prospects, guys who are going to play at A-ball. Your AA and AAA guys might be able to work them around your big league team and get them some work. At least your top guys that run big league camp. But your lower-level guys, like a Bryson Stott, who was the number 1 pick last year. He would have played probably at Clearwater this year. I don't know what's going to happen to those guys. They're going to lose. To me, they're going to lose valuable reps. I don't know. Maybe there'll be what they call complex ball, where just like spring training or instructional league, you have a number of guys at your minor league facility and they play local teams, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Pirates, take bus trips to play them. But as far as, playing legitimate minor league seasons at minor league ballparks with minor league staffs and mascots and, the whole feel of minor league baseball, it's hard for me to think they can get that off the ground at this date.
Jim, this current dispute that's going on between owners and players about 2020 prorated pay, as a guy who's been around for a while, who's covered work stoppages in the past, does this seem it's obviously different because this is an unprecedented time, but I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, how are these two sides going to compromise? Because each side is so staunchly in its position. But that's the case whenever there's a work stoppage.
Right.
So I guess my question is, in this situation, does it seem more complicated, less complicated? How do you see it than previous?
To me, this, rancor, and I'm hesitant to even call it rancor because we haven't heard a peep on finances in like a week after the initial proposal. And then, there was a couple guys popped off and there was some digging in, it didn't go over well PR wise. And all of a sudden the players have really backed off on that. So that to me is a sign that I think they're going to work something out. But, I think this is standing operating procedure. Both sides always dig in early. They always, say a few toss a few inflammatory words back and forth. And then, obviously some years it's taken a strike to get a deal done. But I think both sides realize the uniqueness of this and the importance of having baseball this year. Otherwise, you're not going to have baseball since last year's World Series, since the Nationals, beat the Astros. That's a long time to just disappear from people's consciousness for any sport. So I think both sides are going to ultimately realize that and figure something out and get back on the field and, try to have an 82-game season and then a postseason that's going to allow both sides to recoup some revenues. So I still think I'm optimistic they're going to work something out, I don't think teams are talking about where they're going to have spring training unless they really have a good vibe that they're going to work something out.
Your NBC Sports Philadelphia podcasts are now on the My Teams app. You can listen to Phillies Talk, Eagle Eye, Sixers Talk, and Flyers Talk right now on the My Teams app. There's, one of the things that was reported over this last week was that if there are games without fans in stands and players were paid the entire prorated 82-game portion, that teams would lose $1 billion more than if there were no games at all. But to the point that you just made, if baseball disappeared from the public consciousness, especially at a time when there's concern. I mean, there's been concern over the last 5 to 10 years about the game decreasing in popularity. Sure. I'm not saying that it would be a death sentence if there's no baseball in 2020, but it could cause some irreparable damage, right? I mean, you would have some fans who would be so sickened by what happened that they might leave altogether. You'd have people that just with 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 an entire year without baseball, they could move on to other things. And like, that has to be something on the players' minds too, right?
I would hope so. I would hope so because, the players need to be, even guys on long-term contracts and things. I mean, the guys that are on, young guys, they don't want the game to go away. They want to make the major leagues and get paid. It would be very injurious to the industry, to the game, and players need to be partners with owners and with MLB to grow this game. And to shut down for a year, you're not growing the game. So if they're cleared by the medical officials, they need to figure out a way to get these financial debates solved and get on the field and have I still think it could be a fun season because of the shortness of it. It's a sprint. I think we're going to see some different things, DH in both leagues, might see some double headers. Somebody gets hot, they're going to become a great story individually. A team gets hot, it's going to become a great story team-wise. And I think a 14-team postseason tournament, call it a tournament, call it what it is, and have some fun with it, I think it could be pretty cool.
It'll also be cool in the final weeks to see how close some guys are getting to milestones. For example, last season, Hyunjin Ryu of the Dodgers threw 13 starts, which is right around the innings count that a pitcher would have this season. If the season's 82 games, we're looking at between 90, 95 innings. Hyunjin Ryu threw that many innings last season. Had he allowed 2 fewer earned runs, his ERA would have been lower than Bob Gibson's 1.12. It would have been 106. Now, obviously, some of that's going to come with an asterisk, but you mentioned that there's going to be some quirky, fun things in 2020. And that could be one of them. Now,
what are some of the other ones? I know you.
I did, yes.
Give me a few of the other ones.
Last year Justin Verlander was very close to having the lowest WHIP in baseball history. That belongs to Pedro in 2000, 0.73, which is just crazy, given that was right in the steroid era. Verlander last year was a 0.80, and if his season ended right around the time that you would think that this season would end, it would have been lower than Pedro's. Nobody's obviously hitting 400. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to hit 400 ever again. Do you? The way the game's changed?
No, it's no. I don't think we're going to see it. No.
Yeah. Now, getting back to player pay, you remember last year when Aaron Nola signed his extension, 4 years, $45 million. My initial reaction was, this is a pretty team-friendly deal. Aaron Nola was coming off an amazing season in which he finished third in Cy Young voting, had an ERA lower than any that Roy Halladay had here, and he signed that deal. There were a lot of deals last season that were signed that the industry looked at and was like, these are really beneficial for the team, maybe not so much for the player. But now you look at the billions of dollars that are going to be lost from the game this year and how that could impact extensions moving forward. The Nola deal looks a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I still think the deal is in the eye of the beholder. I think he opted for the security of $45 million with a chance to even make more. That deal, the agent community kind of looked askance at that deal, thinking that, well, why would you jump on that when you could maybe make more down the road by kind of riding out the market? But if the revenues are going to be down this season, and clearly they are, that's going to reflect in what teams can spend next offseason and maybe the offseason after that. And that could be reflected in the free agent pool. So there might be less dollars to spend on free agents next winter. I don't think it's going to affect the upper tier guys like Mookie Betts and JT Realmuto, but it could affect the middle tier guys. And that might make a decision. Guys that jump down those offers like Aaron Nola might make them look like a good decision. So I still think those are really intensely personal decisions for the player. Locking up lifetime worth of security. It's a matter of becoming rich or filthy rich. So I still say it's what the player wants to do. You have to do what's right for you. Aaron Nola thought that was right for him last year, and with less revenues in the tank, possibly the next couple winters because of the shutdown. Maybe he did a good thing.
All right, Jim, I'm going to give you an over-under here. The over-under is 0.5, and the topic is number of pitchers the Phillies have or will face this season who will complain after allowing a big hit that they couldn't get a grip on the baseball because they couldn't lick their fingers, or they couldn't touch the rosin bag. Is it 0.5? Are we going to hear any pitchers use that excuse?
You'll hear some, you'll hear somebody will mention that they couldn't get a good grip on the ball. I mean, they mentioned that already because of the the hardness of the balls the last few years. In spring training, some guys were commenting that the ball felt a little different this year. But again, here we talked about this the other day. How do you police this stuff, right? If a pitcher licks his fingers, it's almost a habit, and rubs up the ball. I mean, what's the umpire going to do? Are they going to actually police that action? Is that going to become ball one if he backs off the mound and licks his finger and rubs up the ball? I don't know. I think that's something they need to address. Obviously, you do it on the mound, it becomes ball one. But that's a good question. I'm sure privately guys would use it as an excuse. Maybe some of them would use it publicly. I don't know, but it's going to affect everything because infielders spit in their gloves. They, try to, on a cold night, you try to keep that leather kind of loose, and so the ball stick in there, and it's going to affect a lot of things.
I think you almost have to create a penalty like ball one there, because if not, it's just not going to be enforced. I mean, think about a couple of years ago when baseball tried to tell players you can't step out of the batter's box.
Yeah.
And then, guys like David Ortiz and Odubel Herrera were still taking just as long during their at-bats as they always did because there was no enforcement of it.
Yeah, there's certain things that have to be policed because you would think it was going to give you a competitive advantage. If one guy is bold enough to lick his fingers, and the other guys are following the rules, well, that's a competitive advantage. I don't think spitting a seed in right field gives you a competitive advantage. I don't think you should be necessarily punished for maybe spitting in the on deck circle or something. But yeah, they're going to have to look at how a pitcher handles the ball and what he's allowed to put on it. It is it's tricky. That's something, that's why the MLB passed on that 67-page document with these operational guidelines. The union needs to dig into those and come back with alterations because it is definitely in need of alterations. And, you want the pitcher to be able to feel the baseball because otherwise somebody's going to wear one in the air flap. You don't want that either, right? Because if that happens, you can't fight. So there's a lot of catch-22s in this thing.
Phillies Talk is presented by Team Toyota, and Team Toyota is kicking off a new season with safety, savings, and service. Visit today at teamtoyota.net to be part of the team and stay on the road to victory. I don't know if you saw this, Jim, but Dan Herron, who's one of the funniest guys on Twitter, former pitcher, he tweeted the other day that, he's been thinking about it, and he was the point of his tweet was that there's no way that MLB is going to de-juice the ball this season as they look to put on as entertaining a product as possible, given that last season all those home runs that flew out of the parks. I wonder if it's going to be closer to the baseball that we saw in spring training that you talked to some Phillies pitchers about, or if it's going to be the 2019 baseball. We'll probably know pretty early in the season.
Yeah, we'll know by the way they're jumping. He just talked to the pitchers. Zach Eflin was adamant the ball felt different. It didn't feel like, a brick anymore. There was a little bit of give to it. And he thought that was going to help the health of the pitchers because when it's so hard and you try to dig in and torque the baseball, you end up digging in so hard you get a blister. So it allows a little bit of a softer shell on the ball, if you will, allows the pitcher to manipulate the ball a little bit. And, speaking of pitchers and speaking of Phillies pitchers, so 5-man rotation, which we talked an awful lot about this winter in spring training number 1. We talked a lot about how they're going to fill that 5-hole and Pivetta and Velasquez competing for it. With the shortened seasons now, don't you think it really puts Pivetta and Velasquez under the gun because now Spencer Howard's workload limit is quite easily manageable. He could end up in that rotation.
Well, do you think that we could see a 6-man rotation? Because they're going to look to preserve some of these arms, and that could be a way of doing it. So,
that certainly could be a way, but you're also going to be deeper into your bullpen because guys aren't going to be going as deep. And, this might allow you to put both of those power guys in the bullpen, Velasquez and Pivetta, if you went with a 5-man. I know they both want to start, but, I don't see a lot of power in that bullpen, if you know what I mean. And that would give them some power out there. I just think there's a kind of a fascinating number of possibilities that have emerged now.
Well, typically you see rookie starting pitchers treated with kid gloves in terms of their workload, but that's going to be the case for almost all starting pitchers this season, right? Like a lot of guys are going to be going 4 or 5 innings.
Right.
What's the difference?
It's like Mother Nature now is going to treat them with kid gloves. This is, it's kind of kind of interesting. It allows them a kind of a smooth path to bring Spencer Howard into the rotation. I mean, it's not that smooth because you're going to disappoint two guys who want to be in the rotation. But, hey, it's about building a team. It's about building a team within a team. That's called the pitching staff. And if that can give you some power in the bullpen, you think those two guys can help you down there, I think it's something you got to consider, really do, because you got to get hot. You got to get hot quick in an 82-game schedule, right? You got to hope Bryce Harper comes out hot, Hoskins gets some confidence in that new swing, and then you could make it a really interesting summer.
And the calculations have to change in the front office of how good they think this team is, how much they can contend, because 82 games, smaller sample size allows for more randomness. That's one. Two, if the playoff field is expanded to 14 teams, we're talking about potentially seven National League teams making it. That increases your chances greatly too. So at that point, it's almost like if you're a team that's on the precipice of contending, and then a couple things make it even more likely that you can contend, you kind of owe it to yourself to have the best guys there. You owe it to yourself to have Alec Bowman, Spencer Howard on this team as long as they show that they belong and can adapt to the big league life.
Absolutely. I think you owe it to yourself all the time. I do. I know, the whole thing, starting the clock, Chris Bryant, Michael Franco, bringing a guy and keeping him back. I mean, that's something they got to address in the next CBA. I do think sometimes you have to keep a guy back to get that extra year of control. I think that makes a lot of sense for your team and your organization. But I mean, in shortened season here, 82 games, and they're going to allow that expanded roster. And Alec Boehm can help you. Spencer Howard can help you. Go get them, boys.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Phillies Talk. He's Jim Salisbury. I'm Corey Seidman. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll get at you early next week with a special guest.